Oh, hello. This is the ambassador for the NSX community? Okay. Oh, everyone who's watching is already subscribed. I know that because the NSX community is awesome. Well, I'll talk to you later. I got a video to make. Guys, welcome to a new video by Drivers Therapy. Today, we're going to be talking about the original equipment on the NSX, and that is the in-car phone. This is really exciting because we just made a video about the 90s talking about pretty much the first cellular phone. And this time we're going to be talking about this phone. Now, we have to establish something. Huge thank you and shout out to Charles Brown with NSXRacks.com and for him letting me borrow this. He shipped this out to me and gave me some time with it so I could research it, talk about it. But my research hit a couple of dead ends, and luckily Steve Glover sent me a thesis. If you know Steve Glover, then you're not surprised. He sent me a lot of information about the phone, and he even took the time to upload the manual on NSX Prime. I think the Facebook like media or links or something like that. But Steve Glover is awesome. So thank you, Steve Glover, if you're watching. I am going to quote some of the things you said. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. Well, as you know, guys, this iPhone 13 Pro is on the 5G network. Well, they tell us that. You know, they say it's rolling out. It goes between 3G, 5G. Whatever happened to 4G? It's like they skipped it, right? I don't know. Maybe I wasn't aware of it. But we're going to be talking about this phone in the NSX, which is 1G. I know, it's crazy, right? Not too long after that, they had 2G. So essentially, the 2G network was a digital network. You could actually send text messages and faxes and stuff like that. But the 1G network was still analog, just phone calls and stuff like that, or transmitting power, which we'll talk about that here in a bit. So let's go ahead and start looking at the phone and telling you how it works. And we even went one step ahead. We nerded out. So we're going to give you some really cool information. Okay. So this is what I got from Charles. He did mention we're missing the funky little antenna. We could be missing a few more items, but I think everything's here. And I took a lot of time to see how it was made. So essentially, this is a Motorola phone that was branded NSX, but it's still a Motorola product. You have Motorola labels on here. But if you really, really know your cars and if you know some of your electronics, you will see something very interesting. All right. Now, doesn't that look like a VGA cable to you? You know, back in the days on the monitors? I mean, I feel some people still have VGA cables. But if you look at this connector here, oh, you guys know what this is. This is definitely a Honda connector. And you Honda NSX guys out there, Acura NSX guys too, look at this. Doesn't this remind you of the CD player connector in the back? So right off the top, you could see we have a Honda connector, but then you start seeing a little bit of different stuff. Now this definitely doesn't look like a Honda connector there, but this does, you see? So it seems like the Honda engineers collaborated with the Motorola engineers to kind of either save some money by, you know, doing some of their wiring, doing some of the components themselves, versus Motorola taking on the whole project, because, you know, Honda does make harnesses. But some of this stuff, for a fact, Honda did not really make or produce, because you don't see a lot of coaxial cables, which is usually used with transmitters and radios on a car. So that definitely was a Motorola thing. All right, so before we start going super nerdy on it, let's go ahead and look at everything. We're going to look at the phone and go kind of show you how it worked. So this is your phone, and this is the base for it. And you have a button here. And the manual that Steve uploaded, Mr. Glover uploaded, tells you what everything does. A lot of it's pretty straightforward. Your power button, your functions, your in-call, your nice little digital readout. But if we follow here, you know, our standard little cable thing, your normal typical phone connector from back in the days. If you guys don't know what this is, this was how all phones looked. Man, I feel old now. And then it connects to this little box here. This box to me almost seems like a switch box. It's just essentially an intermediate component that's going to run as a switch box to the transmitter and to the other switches and such. So this connects to the actual box, and then this box connects to the transmitter. But then we have this little console in the center. And this is really important because when you guys look at NSX pictures, you might have seen this. Here in front of you is the DDVRD. Oh, I love acronyms. It is the directory dialer and voice response device. Now let's go ahead and show you all the functions and all the buttons. Well, the first most important thing for me is this, and this is going to be the microphone. If you think about it, this was really neat because this was the first hands-free phone setup, in my opinion. Like whatever cars had this was so cool because you could essentially talk through the car radio and drive and talk with somebody, which is pretty epic. I know we do that all the time with our phone now, in our cars now, but this was really revolutionary in its time. All right, so the button right above it, the up arrow key, is used to scroll upward through the memory directory. And it shows the memory directory location 0 to 10, which I'm thinking maybe it was just 10 phone numbers. I'm not sure, but if that is, that'd be a very small memory. All right, voice response will indicate memory location. I'm not sure if it like told you something or like gave you some feedback. That's interesting. Okay, then we have the right arrow. The right arrow key is used to voice respond telephone number in selected memory location. Also used to mute the microphone when in a call. That's really neat. And then the down arrow is used to scroll downward through the memory directory location 10 to 0. Okay, so then this one, the other one's use 0 to 10, and this one's 10 to 0. And it says voice response will indicate memory location. I wonder if it told you like 1, 2, 3. That'd be pretty cool. And then this button right here, phone key is used to switch to cellular phone mode and mute the car speaker radio. Also used in conjunction with other keys to place and receive calls. That's a pretty cool thing. Okay, let's talk about the transmitter. So Elise did a lot of research, and we're going to first talk about this FCC ID because I felt like you could get a lot of information from that, and she did. So Motorola applied for a grant of equipment authorization from the FCC on May 12, 1989. Now, if you remember, the Acura NSX was released in 1991. So this was a project at the end of their project. So they must have thought of this at the end because that's crunch time. The FCC approved the grant on June 23rd of 1989. This is a licensed non-broadcast station transmitter. And here is an actual picture of the FCC document or license or authorization. And it talks about its frequencies, its output, its tolerance. And in the bottom, I thought it was very interesting. It says the output power is continuously variable from the value listed in the entry to plus the 5 to 10% of the value listing. So it's a tolerance, saying that the frequency might deviate from that a little bit. So, okay. So essentially, this was a 3-watt transmitter. And if you guys aren't familiar with transmitters or amplifiers, when I was in the military, we had a lot of stuff that looked like this. So it brings me back home. And essentially, what it does is it takes a signal and it amplifies it, and it just makes sure that that frequency could go farther and that you could be able to communicate. And so this was a 3-watt transceiver, and it was for an analog phone, which is what we talked about earlier. And essentially, this was specifically designed just for that frequency that we spoke about in that 800 megahertz zone. But yeah, this is really neat because when it comes to analog communicators or communication devices, you essentially had to usually boost the signal for a lot of the different frequencies in order for them to be functional and for them to work. And I'm not sure, back in the days, cell phone was spotty. I was very young. I was like 6 or 7 when this stuff was coming out. And so I wasn't sure how reliable this was, but I'm sure that there was definitely some problems with the frequency with certain things. But yeah. And you know what's funny, guys? I actually don't know how much this was. I know it was offered from 1991 to 1994, but I thought it'd be fun to leave that for you guys to tell me in the comment section, because sometimes I love it when you guys save me some research time. But I'm not sure if you're, familiar with the term filibuster, right? But we're about to have a YouTube filibuster. And the reason why is because Steve Glover is awesome. He sent a lot of information and I just want to read it because it was a lot of good data and I couldn't remember it. So we're going to have a filibuster because I'm going to read what he said about all this stuff. So just strap in and be ready to be Gloverized. All right. Remember, 1991 was the start of the transition to digital, and the Motorola phone bags, being completely standalone, were easy to transition. Now, if you guys weren't familiar, there is another product, like he was saying, the bag phones. And the bag phones were essentially this, but in a bag, and people carried them. It looked like a big lunch bag. And they're like, let me take a call. But yeah, I mean, you got to be someone important to have that, or I don't know. But anyways, the NSX phone, being that it was designed to integrate with the stereo system and had to be mounted in a car, wasn't upgraded much more static in its configuration. When 2G was introduced, one of the big advantages was it could be multiplex, and that drove the cost of cellular service down significantly. But even up to the late 1990s, early 2000s, the digital cellular service in the US was either code division multiple access CDMA or time division multiple access TDMA. And it depended on which carrier you used and where the US you were physically located. Now remember, he writes better than I read. I suck at reading, and you know what? I get to use that excuse as ESL, baby. Oh yeah, I'm a taco man. All right, we're in the US physically located. AT&T in Florida was one CDMA, but AT&T's network in Norfolk, Virginia news area was TDMA. Oh, and then there was GSM, T-Mobile, that operated on a different frequency as well as some other differences. GSM phones had a SIM card that allowed switching phones to be very easy, where CDMA phones did not. User ID data was stored on the carrier's equipment, not SIM on the phone. So essentially, just like we have SIM cards before, I guess back in the days when you got a phone, you had to essentially code it to the person or something like that. But starting with LTE 4G, so there was a 4G, there was finally standardized technology used by all carriers. Honda probably didn't race to get Motorola to redesign the NSX car phone, especially by 1993 when they were only talking about a few hundred a year to convert to 2G digital. So it looks like at the end of the day, Steve is awesome. I really appreciate that information. We learned a lot. This was 1G analog, and then finally they transitioned to 2G, of course, and there was a lot of changes within that. And of course, we're now in 5G. But as you could tell, this was a very special time, and the NSX just had a lot of great things going on for itself as far as breaking barriers and accomplishments. And this, to me, was a really cool thing because I think that they got the best company at the time, Motorola, to put together a great phone. And just like they did with the rest of the car, I feel like they did a great job with it. And it's really neat to see this 30 years down the road, especially with our literally little computers in our hand, right? It's crazy. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, community, for watching this video. I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed it. You guys take care and we will see you soon.